Welcome to the Communication Workshop. I'm Abby Wick. I'm the NDSU Extension Soil Health Specialist. So I work primarily with farmers, with other educators, including our county agents and our CS organizations, anyone that brings information out to people that are going to put it on the ground. So that's my role at NDSU.
My name is Tim Hamrich. I work in communications consulting. I have been hosting the Soil Sense podcast along with Abby for the last over a year now, almost 2 years going on for that podcast, and I've been in communications for several years.
Last year we had Lee Briese do a yo-yo trick. I don't want to call it a trick because it was really a message about using a yo-yo and what that means for soil health. And so we thought that same message could be applied to communication. And so we recorded Lee in a video, which we'll show here, and then Lee will join us over Zoom to answer some questions and follow up in some of that conversation.
Honestly, we all go to meetings and we want to take one thing away. If I could just take one thing away from this meeting, that would be great. Okay, well, think of that as you're being a presenter. What one thing do you want your audience to remember? Make it memorable. Make it to the point that they remember what it is, and then use that to draw connections. So when I use the yo-yo, I have several tricks, but they all relate back to the idea of practice, building skill, and understanding yourself. Missed it. Need to practice that one. Now we got it. That's the point. Get it right and make it work. So once you've got your basic tricks down, you got your loop, you got it to fit you, you know who you are, you know how you communicate, you got your message, your singular message. Now add some variability to it, add some variation to it, make it a little bit more exciting, do some different things and some different tricks and some semi-amazing things. It don't necessarily have to be that hard. If you want to be memorable, you might need those. I use the yo-yo to talk about building skills and moving forward. We can talk about the same way, whether it's through soil health practices or through communication practices. You got to start at the beginning. Well, that's the point of the yo-yo. This is one of the first tricks you got to learn. It's how to get it to sleep at the bottom of the string and then come back. You can't learn that trick, you can't do other tricks. Things like rock the baby. It has to sleep at the end. Okay. See if we can do Eiffel Tower. Maybe, maybe not. Not too bad. Again, if it doesn't stay at the end of the string to sleep, it's not going to work. One of the first ones you'll learn is to walk the dog. Get it to sleep, let it pull across the carpet, the floor, whatever, that kind of thing. Another one that people have heard of is round the world. Again, it has to sleep at the end of the string. If you don't know that skill, you can't do the rest. What is your communication style? How do you communicate? How do you talk to people? And I'm not talking about your presentation style. I'm talking about your actual communication style. How do you talk to your friends? How do you talk to your family? How do you talk to your spouse? How do you talk to your kids? What do you use to communicate? If you're the jokester that's always telling the dad jokes or has a joke for everybody at the office, they always know that you're coming in. Bob's got a joke today. I wonder what it is. Then go ahead and use jokes. If you don't normally tell jokes, that's not your trick. And it's not gonna go well, okay? I can stand here with juggling balls. That's not what I've practiced. When you do that every day, when that's your normal thing, you practice it every day, whether you know it or not. Use that to your advantage. That's you, that's honesty, that's the real you. So make that come out in your presentation. Use that to be real, personal, and then communicate with your audience through the skills you've developed. So within your communication style, you have variability. You have different ideas and different ways to do things. These yo-yos are imperial style yo-yos, in case you needed to know that. They're thinner. These are butterfly style yo-yos that are wider, that are easier to do the string tricks on. These are easier for looping tricks or hand tricks, those types of things. So, but they're still yo-yos. They're still part of your communication style. They're still part of the thing. They're flavors within it that you can use for different messages at different times adds depth, adds clarity, but it's still a singular idea, a singular message. Pull it together to make it play like that. And then you have balance. You have all of these tools now, and you can do different tricks with all of them. And you can make them fit in different situations, in different areas. Like when your technology goes out on you, what do? What's your plan B? Have a backup. If the string gets tied up on one of these, I'm going to go to one of these. I can still do the same kind of thing. Make your skills adapt to what you're doing, but don't make you adapt to them. That's going too far. You've gone to the point where you're trying to be something you're not. Be who you are. Use the tools that you have that are common to you and make sense.
Okay, I was smiling through that whole video because I love Lee Briese using a yo-yo.
We have the pro yo-yo champion here with you back via Zoom. Lee, thanks for coming back.
No, don't go too far. I know just enough tricks to get in trouble. There is actually a pro in Fargo, so we don't want to cross that bridge.
Oh, I don't want to throw down the gauntlet on the yo-yo competition.
I will lose.
Lee, I think a great question to ask you to start off is, when did you decide that using a yo-yo could be something to communicate a message, originally about soil health, but now about communication?
Well, it really started years ago when I was just trying to communicate some difficult science messages. It was hard to communicate some of those topics and some of those ideas. And actually the first trick I did, I guess you could call it, was a Kool-Aid trick talking about saline soils. And that was resounding, and people remembered it. And people would come up to me. They didn't remember the science instead, but they remembered I was the guy with the Kool-Aid. So that's really what bridged it. I'm like, okay, I can use that. That's a skill that I have. Yeah, and when we were working up to the Dirt Workshop last year, there was a fair amount of pressure. You had me as a keynote, and I had to come up with something memorable, something I wanted to make sense, to stick with people. And I was actually in a field driving around just going, you got to learn the basics. If you don't know the basics, there's no way you can do this. And it was years ago with my kids. They did yo-yo, and it was one of those things. There's a couple little tricks that you really need to learn before you can move up. And I thought, man, that's something everybody can do. Everybody knows what a yo-yo is. They probably had one, and if not, it's attainable and accessible. And so that was one of those things. It's like, okay, that applies to a broad audience. We can use it as an analogy to talk about lots of different things, and it really fits.
It did fit really well. And we had, I think, 225 people last year using yo-yos while you were talking about this concept, which is great. I mean, it's a memorable thing. And I do remember the Kool-Aid trick that he was doing before. I think that was one of the first meetings I went to with Lee. He had the Kool-Aid out, and then he started bringing sledgehammers, and then he started bringing a fish tank. And then I'm trying to think of all the other things, Lee, that you've used to share a message. And you're right, it's been very effective.
Lots of props, and some of them have failed. And that was the point. Like, I've tried several different demonstrations. Some of them they don't work. Whenever you're going to do a demonstration or something up front, there's always the possibility something goes wrong. It's not going to work. It's another thing to add to your deal. But with the yo-yo, it's kind of nice because I don't claim to be an expert. So when the trick goes wrong, you saw that in the video, I missed that landing. Like, oh, well, that happens. I'm human. I'm normal. I need to practice that more. That's fine. That's being relatable. It's being honest. And I think that's important when we communicate with people all the time. Even if you are an expert, you're still going to make a mistake. That's okay. Admit it, own it, be truthful, and then learn from it and move on.
I think that's such an important point, Lee. I mean, you seem so self-aware. You've got all these yo-yo skills. You kind of know your style. But I think what's missed by just having you on via Zoom for a few minutes is how long it took you to become so self-aware through that kind of trial and error process. And that's definitely something that I'm glad we can put on display so we can show, the result of that iteration that you've gone through and kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't.
That is a great point, Tim. So the Kool-Aid trick started in 2010. I look back, and that's when I started some of that stuff. And it did not work well every time. You have to refine, you have to try different things. And then you try other things that did or didn't work. Tried to use microscopes in meetings, didn't work, that type of stuff. You just learn from it and you move on, and be okay with being wrong, be okay with making a mistake, but you can still pick up and move from that. And that's really one of the things that happened. I have made mistakes on stage, and I still had 30 minutes to fill, and my 10-minute part didn't work. Now what? And so you got to think on your feet. And it's one of those things that once you practice it, and this is the deal, I didn't just buy a yo-yo the day before we made this video. I've been working on that for a year, and I'm still not very good. My 8th grade nephew will whoop me every time. But it's the thing is, like, you put time and energy into it and you practice it. That's kind of the point of the communication. That's the point of soil health. And it's part of this message of when you practice, you have to practice it. I can tell you about yo-yo. You can watch yo-yos. You can buy a yo-yo and leave it on your desk. If you don't pick it up, put it on your hand and practice with it, it's never going to help you. You're not going to get anywhere with it. So you really have to put the time and effort into it, and you're going to make mistakes. That's part of the deal. And people expect you to make mistakes. If you don't, then you're not really normal.
So I hope not everybody's thinking, oh boy, I got to go get a yo-yo or I got to do juggling balls or something like that. We're seeing across the screen that people really do like this metaphor. And so Lee, are there other tips or ideas that you could give people for finding that style or finding that way to be memorable from a meeting?
Yeah, you really need to be you. I think that's really the important thing. Be who you are, find out those things. And again, if you're not really clear on that, if you're a little fuzzy about it, ask the people close to you, the people in your life. Find out what things that you do that are unique or interesting or whatever, and then expand upon those and play them up a little bit, make them a little bit bigger, put that foot forward and project that a little bit. And that should give you confidence. And again, you're starting with something you do anyway, so it shouldn't be that hard. And then you just work at it a little bit to build it up a little bit higher. There's so many different skills and ways to do this. Yeah, and if it's yours, it's genuine. If you take my yo-yo trick and you try to do it, it may not work for you. Yeah, and that's especially true with a lot of these things, like the jokes or the comments or whatever. As long as it's you and it's honest, I think it works.
Well, there's no way I'm going to be able to do the Eiffel Tower, so I'm not going to try to adopt that anyway. But no, I think that's great, and I love this metaphor in general. And one thing it really rings home for me is you need to have a feedback loop, right? The way that Lee can grow and iterate is by asking people after, did that work? Did that not work? Did it sink in? Did it not?